Alright guys, if you don't mind, share the video out by all means. I'll get the music stopped and we're gonna get ready for this, man. I'm excited. So tonight, as you can see, we got a live reading of Revenant. Yeah, let me get my webcam out of the way so we can see these beautiful covers. Got a live author reading of Revenant by Valentine and The Cure, which is book 2 from Cherie. If you recall, I took last week off for the holiday break, but the week before we read an excerpt from book 1 from Cherie in this same series, which was called Expedition. So here we're coming back. We got Revenant and The Cure. Both of them are already up for anybody joining. Just to let you guys know how this whole thing works. I have an author page that, you know, every day when I do the reading, I open up this author page that puts both authors up. Little synopsis about their book, links that you can click to go find where you can purchase their book and support the author, or a link on their name where you can go find their website, their social media, anything you can do to support them. I'm very excited for this week. So let me close these down. I'll bring my webcam back up. I'm very excited this week. I know I am on the Indie Author Connect TikTok, for those of you who are on TikTok. Trying to get us some more attention. I had built up a little bit of a regular viewership on Atlas Creed, so I'm trying to build that up now on Indie Author Connect because Atlas Creed has been given the thumbs down on going live on TikTok for some reason. I'm still debating that, still trying to figure that one out. So we'll see how it all goes. But if you don't mind, share the link out to people. Let's try and get some more people in here, because what we are trying to do with this is read these excerpts from these books, and in order to promote these authors to potential readers and hopefully gain up some interest, and maybe you'll find your next read. Alrighty, so I'm going to get into this. My first read tonight is going to be Revenant by Valentine. That's a little bit of a vampire story, and the excerpt that he gave me was just phenomenal. Blown away by the excerpt. It took me a minute to get into it, and I mean, just a couple seconds really, as it builds up into what's happening. But man, it gets intense, and the characters just kind of jump right off the page, and I'm really excited to kind of voice them, or bring them to life anyways. Let me get rid of my webcam, and I'll get the promo pick up for him. Oh, sorry, for them. So here we're going to be doing a reading from Revenant, which is book 1 in this series, as you could see by the website we just had up. And I'll get to that here in just one second. And again, if you're in here, by all means, share the live out. Let's get some more people in here, get up some interest. If you're viewing on YouTube or on Twitch, by all means, invite your friends. If you are an author that would like to have their book promoted and read, visit my website. I'm more than happy to do it. I'm booked out through the end of February right now, but I'm happy to bring in as many authors. And a little bit of a shameless promotion as well. I just started a project. As you can see, if you're on my TikTok, I'm on Indie Author Connect, which is a community that I'm building. And, for those of you that are on YouTube, can see the Indie Author Connect in the top right of your screen. It's an indie author community where we have audiobook narrators, editors, alpha, beta, ARC readers, so on and so forth, that kind of come together and work together and build up a nice relationship. The website actually features local events where we've got conventions, and expos and festivals broken up by states, just for the United States right now, but I am working on international. I've got some things in Canada, Australia, and Europe right now, and I'll be building that up as soon as I have the US done. So if you are an indie author and you're at all interested in joining a community, go over to Indie Author Connect. The website is in the link of my bio on TikTok, or just indieauthorconnect.com. All right, let's dive into this. So like I said, this is Revenant by Valentine. "Hello?" I called out, because that's what you do when you walk into a room that you're not sure is empty. Standing in front of the window, facing away from me, was a tall, dark figure. The lamp on my bedside table was on and illuminated just enough of the room to cast shadows, but not bright enough to get a clear view of the person, just their silhouette. "Ethan?" I moved further into the room. "When did you get here?" I was excited and relieved he was back, so I walked faster past the bathroom to the end of the small wall that opened to the rest of the space, and regretted it instantly. I knew at that moment I had ignored my gut and that I should have run to the kitchen to get a knife or run outside to get help and scream or call for an army. Paige was standing near the foot of my bed. Her shoulders were hunched over and her arms dangled loosely to her sides. Her hands and fingers twitched spastically, and her body swayed oddly as her head jerked up to look at me. Her hair was bloody and matted to her neck and face. Clumps of it circled together, sticky and hard, while the rest lay plastered down against her scalp, smooth and shiny with wetness. Beads of blood dripped from the ends and landed on her bloody clothes. The clean, light-colored carpet now a drip-cloth to catch her leaky death. Her pallor was ashen, her eyes were hollow, sunken, and black, and the once whiteness of the sclera in her eyes was bloodshot and dull yellow. Her pupils were cloudy, the vibrant blue now muted and gray, and a sound like congested breath wheezed through her skewed and gaping mouth. "Paige?" My voice trembled in question. Her head jerked and twisted at the sound. Her crazed eyes darted around in the sockets, absent and unfocused. "I didn't know what would happen once I fed off her," Pike said as he turned around to face me. "Pike?" My heart jumped in my chest, and my voice was barely a whisper. "I hoped she would be more like me. Alas, she woke a mindless drone." He sounded bored as he turned around from the window and walked over to her, and picked up a twisted lock of her matted hair. "Rather disappointing, actually." His voice was laced with contempt. He dropped the hair he held and rubbed the red wetness between his forefinger and thumb before licking it off. "She follows directions, though. That's something." He looked at me as she stumbled a few steps away from him, raised her arms, and drug her feet toward me. I was sure it was a demonstration on his part meant to scare me, and it worked. "He killed you. I watched you die." I backed up each step she took toward me. Pike didn't answer me. He pulled his arms behind his back like I had seen him do many times while he was alive. He stood, unblinking, and watched as Paige continued forward, never taking his eyes from mine. His now the same sinister red as the Revenant who had killed him. "Why?" I asked through broken breath. The stranger before me had once been someone I'd grown to know as my friend. Now he was just as deadly and beastly as the creature who turned him. The fear and sadness laced heavily in my words, and as I flinched away from Paige and her proximity, my heart broke at the sight of her face. "Why what?" he sneered. "Why have I come? Why did I turn her? Why am I doing this?" He took a few steps closer to me, and Paige came to a sudden halt. "All good questions, Abby." His voice was changed, as if detached from the sound. All the warmth and kindness he'd once had, no longer there, and in its place was something sinister and cold. "I did this," he pointed at Paige as if she were a thing, "to see what would happen. Of course, I was hungry. I'm always hungry now. But mostly I was just curious. Poor girl, in the wrong place, at the wrong time." He said dismissively of her and what he had done. "I thought she was you." "This isn't you. This is not who you are." "It is now. Blood and power and blood. It's all that consumes me now, Abby. I want more. I need more, and I'll do anything to get it. His voice was dead as he stalked toward me, like a cat hunting prey. His admission a serious threat. What do you want? I shrank away from him and his approach. I was terrified and all alone, and to think I had survived death just long enough to be killed by its neophyte. I came for Ethan. Where is Ethan? His voice twisted into a baleful curiosity. I don't know. My voice broke on the lie. I don't know. I shook my head and tried again. I took another step back, but was stopped by the wall behind me. He stood in front of me now, less than a foot apart. The smell of death on his tongue like the breath of whiskey on a drunk. I can smell him on you, he breathed, in you, coursing through your veins. He nearly whispered as he raised a hand, slowly bringing it to my face. I wanted to recoil, but I was scared stiff, too afraid to move. He pressed a frigid finger against my neck and ran it down the carotid artery and asked me again, "Where's Ethan?" The words caught in my throat and my lips trembled. I shook my head no, instead, in answer to his question. "Liar," he seethed. Pike reached up with his hand and wrapped his stony fingers around my chin and grabbed me tightly. The pressure was so great I knew I must be instantly bruised. He jerked my head to the side and held me in place as he bent his head and inhaled my scent at the base of my throat, up my neck. A deep, throaty rumble vibrated through his chest, the sound somewhere between a growl and a purr. "I wonder what you taste like, mixed with all his blood swimming inside of you," he mused in my ear. Pike dropped his head to my collarbone again and pressed his tongue to my throat, then licked up the length of my neck. "I always knew you'd taste good. I imagined what it would feel like to wrap my mouth around you and sink my teeth into your soft flesh. So elegant and enticing, tender and pliable. Such a unique flavor coursing through your pretty little veins. So rare. You're probably so sweet. But now, I bet you're utterly delectable." He flattened his tongue under my ear and rolled it up to suck on the lobe. Then he tightened his grip around my face and slammed my head into the wall. The air was rancid. That's what woke me, the stench of death. It was so strong it felt heavy and thick, like humid summer air next to a warm ocean. I could feel it around me like a fog, coating my nasal passages with each inhale, clinging to the delicate skin and sticking to the tiny hairs. I was careful not to open my mouth, afraid to taste the particles in the air. My wrists hurt from the binding around them, and my shoulders screamed out in pain. They were stretched beyond an uncomfortable limit. Pulled behind me, wrapped around a pole, and secured with something rigid and hard. My legs were left free and unbound, but they were so cold from the concrete that my bones ached and my joints throbbed. The back of my head pounded, the sore spot thrumming to the beat of my heart, each pulse a twinge and an ache as it hammered through my head. I opened my eyes, but my sight didn't reveal to me any additional information. It was so dark. But I wasn't alone. All around me was a chorus of wheezing, groaning, and gurgling breath that stirred and polluted the air with death. There was movement. The distinct sound of shuffling feet and shoes over a surface, and teeth as they clanked and ground together with the impact of an empty jaw. My legs were stiff and numb. and my feet were like ice. I bent my knees and pulled my calves against my thighs, and ignored the pain as I pressed my weight into my heels and inched my way up the pole. My thighs burned from exertion. My spine was sore from the pressure of the hard surface, and my skin felt on fire from the friction. Blood rushed through my legs and my feet now that the circulation was no longer cut off and the numbness was replaced with a needling tingle that traveled from the bottoms of my feet up into my hips. Even my arms prickled and pinned with the returning nerve sensation. Now that I was upright and standing, the room didn't seem as dark. Either my eyes were adjusting to the blackness, or I was somewhere where light could filter in from oncoming daybreak. With runty steps, I inched my way around the pole to get a better view of the room. I tried to assess my situation. I clenched my teeth and ignored the skin burns as the thin sheath around my wrist stretched and rubbed off with the movement. As I moved around, I saw the dimmest glow lightening the panes of glass in the windows of the room where I was captive. I couldn't be sure because it was still so dark, but I thought it might have been an industrial space. There were other pillars in the room, like the one I was shackled to. I couldn't see them clearly, just columns of dark against the muted light. The room was otherwise empty, besides the shadowy figures responsible for the smell and noise. I stopped when I saw them, only a quarter of the way around the post. My heart rate jumped to where I could hear the blood swoosh in my ears, and my breathing spiked as I shook. My heightened anxiety seemed to agitate the creatures, and their mindless shifting intensified in response. So did their groans of hunger. "Careful," a gnarly voice graveled from a distance. The strangled growl carried over the clamor of the dead, a deep bass that filled the room with dread. I whimpered. The sound of his voice set off every alarm in my body, but there was nothing I could do. I couldn't move. I couldn't protect myself. All I had with me was my voice, and that was worthless right now. Panic spread through my body. I knew that rasp. My body recognized it as it clenched in fear, my stomach aching with remembered pain. I'd heard it only once before, but it frightened me to the marrow in my bones. "You remember me," he crooned in my ear as the deep bass quaked through my startled body. I hadn't heard his approach. The kooks in the room stirred at the sound of his voice, their own deadly chatter whirring with a buzz. His cold breath stung my flesh and sent shivers down my spine. The space around him seemed to cool as he hovered, breathing, tainting and chilling the air. His respiration dark and hollow. My breath was shallow and fast, each inhale of his exhale as frigid as winter and as putrid as death. I fruitlessly pushed myself further against the pole and shrank away from him, but we were locked in place together, me unwillingly and him menacingly. For the longest time, he didn't move or speak. He just stood there in front of me, existing in finis. Abruptly, he turned away, and a loud growl ripped through his chest. The fury was so great it hurt my ears, and I flinched away. Something moved near me. The drag and shuffle of feet drew my attention and gave me a fresh worry. Panic shot through me, and I realized the Revenant didn't have full control over the creatures that loomed in the room. Not like Pike had seemed to have over Paige. Frantically, I worked the binding on my wrists. I tried to pull at the material to stretch it so I could get free, but I only made things worse. I broke open my skin. Whatever was holding my wrists together seemed to have found purchase in the soft flesh and sawed through me at the hint of movement. Another roar escaped the Revenant's lips. Then, the crack of a skull splitting and a body hitting the floor locked me into place. A hard hand wrapped around my throat and squeezed. "Don't move," he seethed. I didn't. I couldn't, even if I wanted to. The scuffle of dead slowed after a moment, and so did their avid cries. Their agitation seemed to simmer second by second until they were once again a mindless drone of surround sound. The light in the room shifted from dark to a blue hue, and I could see everything around me in the muted lambency. The creatures were no longer just shadowy figures, and the Revenant's face was as clear as a bell, his red eyes almost aglow now that they were catching the light. I tried to stay still, to calm and gather myself and my thoughts, but even my struggled breath around his firm grasp caused the tie around my wrist to slash deeper into my flesh. He panted noxiously in my face and groaned in time with the newest cut of my skin as the warmth slipped from the gash and grabbed his attention. The hand he pressed firmly against my throat tightened a fraction more. Then he shifted and moved his arms to swipe at my bound hands behind the pole. His icy fingers swept the trickle of blood that rolled down my hand, and with a deep rumble from his chest, he brought his dirty hand to his mouth to lap his fingers. Vampire, he mewed at the taste of Ethan's blood in my system. And that is the end of the excerpt from Revenant, which was really well done. A nice little intriguing vampire story there. Let me go through some of the comments. Juliet, yeah, absolutely. It was I had a lot of fun kind of prepping for this one, trying to think of the voices that I would do, and I didn't land them quite like I had hoped, but it was still a lot of fun to kind of read and bring these characters to life. And this is just book 1 in the series, so let me go back to the promo here. Drop that down. So yes, that was this one right here, Revenant by R. Valentine. Fantastic read, very intriguing. They took, every inch of the sample limit that I allowed, which is 2,500 words, but it was absolutely worth it. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I see some new faces in here. Welcome. Pebbles, Megan, Juliet, nice to see you guys. I appreciate you stopping in. Rinia, have you read this series? So, since I'm on a break between right now, let me just pull this up. It's the author page. Sorry about that. So, yes, Revenant here, if you click on our Valentine's website, looks like it's part of a series. It looks like 4 of the books are out and the 5th one is coming. So by all means, if you like Revenant, go check out the rest of them. I can tell you right now that the excerpt that I read was phenomenal. It was really well done, really well written. Definitely builds in that kind of creepy factor of the vampires. And I like the concept of how the hierarchy seems to work. Kind of like how you have the mindless drones, and you've got the more clairvoyant ones, or the more clear and affluent ones, kind of just building up the chain. And of course, the Revenant was the one he talked about at the end, who seems to have turned Pike. But super exciting read. R. Valentine, if you're in here, well done. They are on TikTok, so by all means, give them a follow. Rachel Cherie is the next one I'm going to be reading. She is not on TikTok, but she is on Facebook. I'll jump over to this one. Yeah, sorry, Juliet. Yeah, I skipped last week because of the Christmas holiday, so now I'm back at it. Atlas Creed TikTok is still, screwy with going live. They won't let me do it, so here I am on IAX, and maybe we'll draw some more attention over here. All right, so I'm going to bring up the second demo image for our next author and get my face out of the way so you guys can see that beautiful cover. Very nice. Yeah, so for those of you who were here last time, you may remember that we read book 1 of this series before the Christmas break called Expedition. So this is book 2 from the series. There's a 3-book series, and I think we got another reading for her coming up next week for the 3rd book. So I'm going to apologize in advance for anybody that listens. This one has a lot of words that are very uncommon. I think most of them she made up. I'm not sure. I haven't done any research into it, but I'll do my best to not butcher the pronunciation. So yeah, without further ado, this is an excerpt from The Cure by Rachel Cherie. Let me get some water here and I'll start. How long do y'all think we've been in this hole? Rick asked. He squinted in a dark, windowless room. Nearly a decent, Mavner said, groaning as he shifted his weight. Why do you think he put us in here? Elise asked. She leaned on the metal bars that separated them from each other. You tell us, Denishku said. He stood, approaching her while he twisted a band on his wrist. You have been in here 12 Velrins. Scoffing, Elise shook her head. 12 Velrins? I was unconscious for most of it. He was primarily preoccupied with trying to convert me into one of him. 12 Velrins. She ran her hand up and down her arm, hitting the band on her wrist. When she felt the cold metal, she spun it around and examined it. What do you think these bracelets we've got are for? If we all have them, it's probably not good, right? I do not know, but I concur that it is unlikely the reason is benevolent. Mavner clinked his band against the bars. Gushunk, the door to the dungeon-esque room opened, and Sefk strutted in. Salutations, mortals. I have come to welcome you to a new life. With this, he motioned to an injection gun in the hands of his accompanying Kukairn guard, you will be reborn. Rick shook his head, then snorted as he laughed. Oh yeah, when hell freezes over. The others scoffed and sneered in agreement. You misunderstand, the Abd-uri said, lifting his hand up. A metal band encircled his wrist. You will comply. Sefk tapped the bracelet, then the other 4 wristbands began to glow. With a haughty swagger, he approached Denishku. You are first, mighty Topasian officer. In helpless dismay, the others watched as Sefk extended his hand. Dragged by the pull of the bracelet, Denishku involuntarily stumbled forward. Grunting and straining, he turned in an attempt to block the connection with his body. Stop! Elise shouted. She grasped the bars and shook them in protest. The head officer fought against the pull, thrashing and sweating with exertion, but the magnetic force being created by the bracelets was tremendous. Despite his efforts, his arm slipped through the bars, crushing his shoulder against them. With the Topasian's arm extended, Sefk plucked the gun from the Kukairn's hand and easily injected the head officer's forearm with a red serum. Then the Abd-uri released Denishku, and the Topasian slumped backwards towards the ground. He groaned and gripped his shoulder in agony. After looking down at Denishku with a gloating smirk, Sefk turned to Rick. The human frowned. Oh, Krek, no. Sefk activated the bracelet, drawing Rick to the front of the cell. You should be grateful. You are weak right now, compared to what you will become, the Abd-uri said as he injected the human. If you give me superpowers, y'all are gonna die, Rick said between his teeth. He retracted his arm as soon as Sefk disconnected the bracelet. Chuckling to himself, Sefk moved to Mavner. Must you all resist? You are making it more enjoyable than I thought it would be. I prefer to reason rationally about the flaws in your logic, the Mifan spoke up. For instance, forcing entry into your society from individuals who are uninterested in joining you and imbuing them with enhanced abilities and longevity of life has a high probability of generating hostility. Mavner's cool blue gaze swept the room. Have you truly not considered the possible negative ramifications that could come from forcing these individuals into servitude amongst, likely, countless others? I am curious if you've ever contemplated, do you ever shut up? Scoffing, Sefk activated the band again, and Mavner involuntarily staggered to the door. What I recommend is that you accept the inevitability that you will become devoted to your new leader, or you will be discarded, Zogren. The Abd-uri injected Mavner, then turned to Elise. He donned a taunting smile. We are planning something special for you, you cunning wretch. The she-human remained silent. She trembled as she stared angrily at him through the bars, chuckling to himself. Sefk glanced back at his handiwork. Then he put up his nose and left the males groaning in their cells. Denizhku sat slumped against the wall while Rick and Mavner writhed on the ground. "Come on, guys," she pleaded as soon as the Abd-ure was gone. "You gotta fight it." "Ugh, it burns," Rick shouted through clenched teeth. Sweat dripped down his face, and he hugged his injected arm to his chest. "Oh," Elise clutched her head, trying to think. "Denizhku, can you get out with your enhancements?" "No," he gasped, squeezing his arm. "It's strong. Some of the strongest substances I have encountered." Elise's head spun with dead-end ideas, and she kicked at the bars. After a moment of pacing, she pulled out the Heku tile and cradled it in her palm. "Come on. Think, Elise." Suddenly, the locks released. Hearing them, Elise glanced around skeptically, but she could see no one else in the darkness. She gingerly pushed on her door, then stood a moment in uncertainty when it swung open. "What the—" Rick groaned, interrupting the cacophony of thoughts that whirled in her mind. Quickly, she hid the tile away and hurried over to Rick's cell. Squinting up at her as she stood over him in the flowy white dress, he whimpered. Did I die yet?" "No," she whispered, taking a knee beside him. She set her hand on the injection site of his right arm. Then she focused on healing him. Again, she experienced an electric sensation, similar to when she had accidentally healed Denizhku earlier. Rick's eyes cleared of fog, and then grew wide. "Zale, Lewis? You been eating your Wheaties?" With a feeble laugh, she gave his arm a squeeze. "I'll explain later. Can you walk?" "I think so." Rick put his left hand over the hand she had on his arm, shaking his head. "I'm glad we found you." Tears formed in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Me too. You have a gazillion hugs coming your way after we get out of here." She gave his arm a gentle squeeze, then slipped her hand away and rushed to Denizhku. "No!" the Topacian grunted, pulling away from her. "Mavner first." "But I'm already here," she objected, incredulous. "Mavner first," the head officer insisted. He was barely able to speak, and his arm was spasming from the serum clawing through his veins. Fine." With a frustrated sigh, Elise scurried over to Mavner. "Hey, Doc," she said softly, grabbing his arm. "I hate that I no longer completely despise that title," he muttered, semi-incoherently. "Don't worry," Elise whispered. "You'll be back to your eccentric, curmudgeon-y self in no time." When he felt the curative rush course through him, his eyes grew wide. After a moment, his respiration slowed and his cognitive functions normalized. "You can heal me by mere touch." She wrinkled her nose and shrugged, then ran back to Denizhku. He watched her as she knelt beside him, sweat beaded on his brow. Taking a deep breath, Elise held out her hand. "May I?" A shudder ran through the Topacian as he extended his arm. Taking it gently, just as she had done with the others, Elise placed her hand over the injection mark. As she stared into his eyes, he gasped from the sensation of the mending transference mixed with the tingling electricity of her skin against his. Thank you," he managed to mumble. Once she'd finished, she lifted her hand away and nodded. "If you get us off this boat, I'd say we're even." Huffing out a laugh, he flexed his hand and stretched his arms. "Very well." With a little extra effort, Denizhku got to his feet and walked to the exit. "Fortunately, I know where the pods are." "We still have to bust out of the locked room," Rick said, scowling. "Y'all got a key?" "One could say that," Denizhku said. He held up the crystal he had collected from Hadrol. "What's that?" Elise asked. "Hadrol's passkey," Denizhku answered, beaming. "They searched us," Mavner noted in surprise. There are some places even a Kukairn guard will not thoroughly examine, Dineshku said with an impish twinkle in his eye. Laughing, Rick shook his head. Well then, what are we waiting for? I will scout ahead, Dineshku said. Then he opened the door and slunk out. Thud. Just one guard? Rick asked in a low voice as he peeked around the doorpost. Elise's eyes grew. Did you break his neck, too? He will heal easily enough, Dineshku whispered when he reappeared in the doorway. I will be but a moment. Be ready. Then he whooshed away. As Mavner and Rick crouched near the door, Elise reached into her dress and pulled out the Heku tile. She ran her thumb over the flower. Thank you, Hadril, for everything. Suddenly, Dineshku was back. Come, quickly. Taking a deep breath, Elise put the tile back into her dress. However, when she did, the bracelet she also had tucked away in her dress became dislodged and slipped to the floor. She and the other two hurried out of the door after Dineshku, unknowingly leaving the Jijwus stone jewelry on the floor. No sooner had they departed than a dark figure stepped out of the deepest shadows of the room. Plucking the wrist piece off the ground, Hadril held it across his fingers and ran his thumb over the hand-woven design. You're welcome, Elise. May Kosk rue the Rin he chose you. A vengeful grin blanketed his face, and he gripped the bracelet in triumph. Meanwhile, the Dekra crew members hurried as stealthily as possible behind Dineshku. The corridors were reminiscent of a castle rather than a large vessel, sculpted sandstone-like pillars and archways with luxurious burgundy tapestries and alcoves spaced between them. However, it was eerily vacant. After a few turns in the hall, Rick whispered, Where is everyone? I was wondering the same thing, Elise spoke up. Even the alcove guards are gone. We are nearly to the access point I used when I came here, whispered Dineshku. Abruptly, he stopped. So. Ahead, a single Kukairn guard stood in the middle of the corridor. Seeing the group stall, he gestured to a door on his right. The rotation is nearly complete. You must leave now, he said softly so only Dineshku could hear him. Rushing forward as the others followed him, Dineshku eyed the Kukairn. Who are you? He stared back at the head officer without flinching. I am Jasat. Tantov hopes you will not forget your agreement. His expression twitched with surprise. Then Dineshku nodded. I keep my word. Jasat narrowed his eyes slightly, but remained otherwise motionless. He believes that. As the other three caught up to Dineshku, the Topasean moved toward the door indicated by Jasat. Opening the hatch, Dineshku glanced back at the Kukairn guard. We will do what we can. He motioned the others to enter first. Once Elise, Mavner, and Rick were through the exit, the head officer ducked in after them. With the peace service crew on their way, Jasat turned to walk nonchalantly down the hall as though nothing had happened. However, he was startled when he saw Hadril at the end of the corridor. Both of them stood a moment, first uncertain, then exchanging an unspoken vow of silence. Simultaneously, they both super-sped away, leaving an empty hall behind, now filled with secrets. Hey, Rick said softly. He nudged Elise's arm as they sat beside each other in the stolen Abda-Ure pod. Meeting his gaze, she smiled. Hey. You okay? He asked, sincerity infused in his expression. I will be. She nodded as she rubbed her hands up and down her arms. I'm just tired and a little cold. Oh, here. Rick pulled off his robe and draped it around her shoulders. Dineshku tapped on the dashboard. Head Officer Zure to Riev. Riev, this is Head Officer Zure. Benurov, please respond. After a few moments, Zashnu's voice came through the speakers. Benurov responding. Good to hear your voice, sir. Does that mean... Glancing over his shoulder at the she-human, Danishku smiled. We've retrieved our ambassador. On Riav, Zoshnu and Tajim traded relieved expressions. We're glad to hear it, sir, Zoshnu said. We are waiting for you at the selected coordinates. We will be arriving shortly in an Obda-Ure pod, Danishku said. He tapped away at the dashboard as he muddled his way through using it. Notify Inoadne, Zahure signing off. After landing the Obda-Ure transport pod in the docking cell beside the Sa'un, Danishku opened the hatch. The 4 returning members of the crew piled out to the sound of applause. Nicely done, Kajnar said in approval. Elise! Zetjur squealed, barreling forward. The Domheun threw her arms around the fidgety human who was barely holding back tears. And that is the end of the excerpt from The Cure. And again, I apologize. There were a lot of uncommon words in there, so if I mispronounced them, Rachel, I apologize. But still, an interesting story. I'm curious to see where it goes now from them escaping that cell, which, I mean, I don't know if it was quite an escape or if they were let go to kind of see what would happen. I'm kind of curious to see where it goes, but based from the excerpt from book 1 2 weeks ago to the excerpt on this one, very well written and very exciting. And I'm curious to see what the third book holds in store. Let me get the promo back up and get the stuff back in. So yeah, for anyone, every time I do this, my TBR grows. I'm sorry, Juliet. There's a lot of talent out there, and I'm surprised. I mean, I haven't had a dull week yet. All of the readings that have been submitted so far have just been excellent, and I'm really, really interested to see what comes up next. And again, if you are an author that would like your work promoted, then by all means, visit the Atlas Creed author.com website and submit for one. I'm more than happy to. I'm working on improving the process a little bit by setting up an actual calendar to kind of ease some of the process for me. But still, submit what you need. I'll probably set up a form in the meantime so that way things can be done a little bit more smoothly. But let me go ahead and share that demo page one more time. Once everything is together, it all goes together on this author webpage. Again, I've got the book cover, the title of the book, and the author name, and each one of them is a link that you can click to for either the author website or a link tree or social media sites where you can support the author. I have a synopsis on the book that's sent to me by the author. And yes, by all means, if you enjoyed the readings, go check out either one of these books, support the authors. Following this, it usually takes about 24 hours for YouTube to make the video available for me to download. But once that 24 hours is up, I will download the videos. I'll cut them up so just the excerpts of the reading are there. And I'll pop a YouTube video beneath each one. It'll look something similar to, like let's say last week with Rachel, Cherie, and John Lee. It'll look something like this. You'll have the YouTube excerpt right underneath so that you can hear just the excerpt of what I read from that author's work. And it's right there on the page so you can, purchase their book or support them on social media. But again, I really appreciate you guys who showed up and stuck around and supported these authors. If you liked it, go read it. If you're an author that wants to have your work promoted, visit my website. I'm more than happy to promote you. It's completely free of charge. You don't got to worry about that. Yeah, I appreciate everybody for coming. If you're not aware, I got this idea from Sean Amick, who runs the Between the Pages podcast. At the beginning of every podcast, which starts at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so about 15 minutes, he does a little reading of a book that's been sent to him by an indie author. I'm going to be continuing to do this every week, every Thursday, and try to end it by 8 o'clock so that, it doesn't cross over with the Between the Pages podcast. If you haven't heard of the Between the Pages podcast, that's where authors can set up and schedule a live author interview with Sean Amick or Megan or both. Since Megan in the chat here is one of the co-hosts of Between the Pages. Pebbles, I hope not. I'll read it if you send it to me, but I hope not. But yeah, if you guys could, by all means, go check out the Between the Pages podcast. Our Valentine, I see you jumped into the chat. Thank you so much for making it. Really well written piece. I really enjoyed it, and I think everybody else here did too. Juliet said that she already picked up a copy. So, anyways, yeah, I appreciate. I can talk. I appreciate you guys coming, and for anybody that heard my dogs or kids losing their mind in the background, I apologize. It's just one of those nights. But I'm gonna hop off and help my wife out with that. So, thank you guys. See you next week. Bye.